Okay, so we've got some movement taking place. The Colorado Avalanche, or now the Colorado Avalanche, not the Quebec Nordiques, which evens out the conferences. So, ta-da! You don't have 14 in the East and 12 in the West anymore. And if you're a fan of Quebec, this is where the dark time starts, is in 1995. Now, Marcel Aubu sold the Quebec Nordiques, and they got moved to Denver. Aubu was afraid that they were going to start losing money. Quebec hadn't actually lost any money yet, but with a low Canadian dollar and with a trend in salaries up, up, and up, he knew that that would not last. And as soon as that happens, rumors start about, okay, Winnipeg's up next, which of course will lead to a program where it's supposed to help struggling Canadian franchises, because the NHL understands that at the end of the day, Canada is an important part of the NHL. Although there's always been this Canadian belief that that's not the case. But let's get past that and get into the standings for 95-96. Here's the Red Wings with the greatest season that anybody's had since the Habs in the 70s at 62-13-7, followed by the Colorado Avalanche at 47-25-10. So excellent first season in Colorado. Chicago 40-28-14, followed by Toronto 34-36-12. That's right, only 3 teams in the West with plus 500 records. The teams in green, that's your Central Division, or no, that's the Pacific Division. The Central Division is your Northwest. That's right, Northwest, Central. It's stupid names. The Northwest Division, the Central, and Northeast and Atlantic. Anyways, so red is your Central, your Northwest is in green, and over here it's the Northeast in green and the Atlantic in red. So, all right. So Toronto's up next at 4th at 34-36-12, followed by St. Louis at 32-34-16, followed by Calgary at 34-37-11, Vancouver 32-35-15. Again, a bunch of ties helps them stay in it. Winnipeg gets the last playoff spot at 36-40-8. Outside the playoffs, Anaheim 35-39-8. Edmonton 30-44-8. The Dallas Stars 26-42-14. So bad season for Dallas. LA 24-40-18, and San Jose 20-55-7. So San Jose falls apart after a couple of promising playoff runs, but they'll be back. In the East, Philadelphia leads the way at 45-24-13, thanks to some kid named Lindros, and Pittsburgh 49-29-4, followed by the Rangers at 41-27-14. That's right, the Rangers not dead yet. Florida 41-31-10, Boston 40-31-11, Montreal 40-32-10. Montreal's back in the playoffs after missing last year. Washington 39-32-11, and Tampa's in the playoffs for the first time at 38-32-12. Outside the playoffs looking in, the New Jersey Devils, who won the Stanley Cup in 95, missed the playoffs in 96 at 37-33-12. Followed by Hartford at 34-39-9. The Buffalo Sabres at 33-42-7. The Islanders 22-50-10. And the Ottawa Senators keeping last place warm for everybody else at 18-59-5. So another miserable season if you're an Ottawa fan. July 27, 1995, Brendan Shanahan's traded to Hartford by the Blues for Chris Pronger. So Pronger's a member of the Blues, and he'll be prominent from here going forward for St. Louis. December 19th, 1995, Joe Newendike is traded by the Calgary Flames to Dallas for Corey Millen and some kid named Jerome McGinley. So that's kind of a major deal right there. March 20th, 1996, Marcus Naslund is traded to Vancouver for Alex Stoyanov. Naslund does not pay off right away. Naslund doesn't become Naslund for another few years. January 29th, 1996, the Senators end their home winless streak at 17 games. So they've been around for a while. Tampa's in the playoffs. Florida's in the playoffs. Anaheim looks decent. San Jose's been in the playoffs a couple of times. Ottawa's winless in 17 at home. 15 of those games are losses. April 12th, 1996, Detroit gets its 61st win to break the record of the late 70s Montreal Canadiens, which of course Canadiens fans will tell you that they had overtime wins in there and that's not quite the same. And was a lot of that discussion back then. December 15th, 1995, Paul Coffey is the first defenseman to get 1,000 assists in the NHL. And Peter Forsberg has 116 points. Eric Lindros has 115. So again, as I mentioned about the Lindros-Forsberg trade, this is where people are saying, you know what, Lindros for Forsberg straight up is a decent trade. The fact that Colorado, now, not Quebec anymore, the fact that they have so much on their roster from the Lindros deal shows that Philly kind of got hosed in that deal. They hosed themselves. The Hart Trophy that year goes to Mario Lemieux. The Art Ross goes to Mario Lemieux. The Norris goes to Chris Chelios of the Blackhawks. The Calder goes to some kid named Daniel Alfredson for the Ottawa Senators. The Selke goes to Sergei Fedorov. The Vezina Trophy goes to Jim Carey, the net detective. Yeah, this is when he's in his full glory here with the Washington Capitals team that needed a goalie, and he was the guy that answered the call. The Jennings goes to Chris Osgood of the Detroit Red Wings. The Adams for Coach of the Year goes to Scotty Bowman. The Lady Byng Award goes to Paul Kariya. The Masterton Trophy goes to Gary Roberts. So for sticking around and sticking with the game, it goes to Gary Roberts. The Pearson goes to Mario Lemieux. The Conn Smythe goes to Joe Sakic. The Patrick Award for growing the game in the States goes to George Gunn, Ken Morrow, and Milt Schmidt. So nice mix there of guys getting the Patrick Award. And the King Clancy goes to Chris King of the Winnipeg Jets. Your first team All-Stars, Mario Lemieux for the Penguins, Jaromir Jagr, Paul Kariya, Chris Chelios, Ray Bourque, and Jim Carey in net. So all Hall of Famers, and then Jim Carey at the bottom there. Second team All-Star, Lindros, McGillney, who should be in the Hall, LeClaire, Leach, Konstantinov, and Chris Osgood, who some, including myself, feel did enough to warrant inclusion into the Hall of Fame, but I digress. I thought a couple of notes to throw out there that are important, and I'll make them an aside before we get into the playoffs. January 13th, 1996, the Ottawa Senators send their top point producer, Dan Quinn, to the Philadelphia Flyers for cash. They went to the Flyers and said, would you like to have our number one scorer? You can have him. We don't need anything back. Just some money. This wasn't a deal to cheap out on Dan Quinn. This was a deal made because there were always rumors about Dan Quinn everywhere he went. And he moved around a lot. And he scored everywhere he went, but he got moved a ton. And Jeff Brown would have that happen with him as well. And it's interesting when you see this happen with players. And now with social media being what it is, I don't think you could get away with this. I don't think there would be players who move from team to team to team that fans aren't saying, wait a minute, we know why this guy's being moved. So, again, it was just rumor and innuendo. I'm not saying anything about it. But Dan Quinn was one of those guys, and Brown was another one. December 6, 1995, Kovalenko, Rusinski, and Thibault are traded to Montreal for Mike Keane and Patrick Roy. And when you look back on it, and I mean, I looked up a New York Times article on it from December of 1995, and you know, it's that Montreal was a team that had been seen as this proud franchise and was in shambles. And Rajah Uhl, really not helping at the time. Mario Tremblay didn't help his case either. And it was a big, messy divorce between him and Patrick Roy. The whole Canadiens organization and Patrick Roy, it was a messy divorce with. And if you're a Montreal fan, it was a very tough time. Even though, like you could see, they're in the playoffs, it was a tough time for the team in general. So the end all be all here for Montreal was to come out of this with something to show for Roy that would make the crowd excited. And honestly, Kovalenko, Rusinski, and the aforementioned Thibault wasn't a horrible return. It's just that Colorado did something special that year, and it really made it even worse. Now, the question's been asked as well, and I talked about the trades and this and that. People have asked, well, would Roy have ever ended up being a Quebec Nordique? No. There's no way that Montreal trades with the Nordiques and trades them those players. So this is an instance where Mike Keane and Patrick Roy become members of the Avalanche because they're the Avalanche and not the Nordiques. And of course, Mike Keane had been involved in some controversy over saying he didn't need to know how to speak French, and then after a big media backlash, he then took French classes to shut everybody up. the media and Montreal players, it goes back a ways. It goes back a ways. It really, really does. Okay, let's get to the playoffs after one other point, which is the number one overall draft pick that year. For Ottawa was Chris Phillips, who played a grand total of 1,179 games, had 71 goals, 217 assists, 288 points. It was not a fantastic draft in terms of superstar players. You can argue that, yeah, the biggest point producers are like Cullen, Briere, Chara from that group. You can argue, well, they missed out on Chara, but Chara was drafted 56th overall, so he wasn't considered a prime prospect, and he'll get moved around a bit before he really shows that he's as good as we know he is now. But anyways, yeah, Phillips had a solid career for the Ottawa Senators, and under kind of unsung hero sort of kind of, and I say that yet he never really. Anyways, you guys can decide whether Chris Phillips can be considered a lesser number one draft pick or an excellent soldier who played about 20 years in the league. Both sides, I could see the argument. In the playoffs, the Philadelphia Flyers meet the Tampa Bay Lightning. Tampa wins those 2 games in a row. Both of those wins are in overtime, and it's the first time ever that a team has won its first 2 playoff games in overtime. The Pittsburgh Penguins beat the Washington Capitals because it's the playoffs, and they beat them in 6. The New York Rangers knock out the aforementioned Montreal Canadiens in 6 in the first round. So the Rangers get into the second round. Montreal's out. Florida knocks out Boston in 5. And again, this is a time, it's a pretty dark time for me as a hockey fan. Dallas is out, Boston's out in the first round. Who's Vancouver got in the first round? Oh, right, Colorado. Detroit beats Winnipeg in 6. So the Winnipeg Jets' last games at home are against the Detroit Red Wings. The Colorado Avalanche beat Vancouver in 6. And that was a close-ish series, but in all honesty, I knew Vancouver wasn't going to beat Colorado. I looked at the Colorado roster. I looked at what Vancouver had. And despite the fact that you had McGillney on Vancouver having a fantastic year while Bure didn't, they never both had a great year together. They were together, but they never both played excellent hockey. You wait for it. It never happened. But yeah, I knew Vancouver was overmatched. Chicago sweeps Calgary in the first round, so Chicago doesn't want to end up getting back to that 16 losses in a row in the playoffs again, and they sweep Calgary in the first round. St. Louis knocks out Toronto in the first round in 6. So what happens is Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, and Montreal all out in the first round. So if you're a Canadian hockey fan, you've got nothing to watch after the first round. That's it. In the second round, the conference semifinals, Florida beats Philly in 6. And this was when it felt like something special was happening with the Florida Panthers. A team that was considered as much of an underdog as this past year's Vegas Golden Knights. This team wasn't supposed to be here. They weren't supposed to be that good. Their goaltender was excellent. Van Beesbroek was fantastic. And there was some good depth scoring all around, some good pluggers that suddenly found the net more often than they would have anywhere else, and it worked for them. Pittsburgh knocks out the Rangers in 5. So the Rangers, their decline is there, but it's not full-blown yet. And next year we'll see it really in full-blown mode, and that's when they move on from Messier, or Messier moves on from them, however you want to see it, and they make a pitch at Joe Sakic. Detroit knocks out St. Louis in 7. So again, the Detroit Red Wings are trying to exercise their playoff demons. And they do what they got to do. They knock out St. Louis. Colorado knocks out Chicago in 6. So Colorado and Detroit are about to meet in the playoffs for the first time. In the conference finals, Florida knocks out Pittsburgh in 7. There have been good moments for me, and this was a good moment for me only because I always enjoyed seeing an underdog knock out the Penguins. And this was a fun series. It went to 7. And again, Florida really had no business being here. The Pittsburgh Penguins, not only in 93, could have won their 3rd cup in a row. In 95, they had an excellent shot. This was one of their best chances to win a Stanley Cup, and they came up short against the very capable and trapping style of the Florida Panthers. Colorado beats Detroit in 6. And the anger and hatred between these teams, pretty epic in the late 90s. It's one of the best things that ever happened to hockey. And as much as it's painful to Nordiques fans that they lost their team to Denver, Detroit fans are quite happy. Even though they don't win this round, these series are fantastic, and as hockey fans, we looked forward to them. In the finals, you've got Florida and Colorado, and Cinderella doesn't usually win. It's not what happens. 95, the New Jersey Devils were kind of a Florida, not Florida, a Cinderella story, and they won it. But Florida was up against it against the Colorado Avalanche with Patrick Roy, Joe Sakic up front. Yeah, okay. Colorado wins 3-1 and 8-1 in the second game in Colorado, in Denver. 8-1. This is dominant. Game 3, Colorado wins it just by a hair, 3-2, and then Game 4 in Florida goes to triple overtime. And I remember thinking, it would be nice if Florida could just get one. Just get one against Colorado, just so it's not a sweep, and then Uwe Krupp, and it's a sweep. In the playoffs, your goal leader, Joe Sakic, with 18. Your assist leader is Fedorov with 18. Points leader is Sakic with 34. Wins leaders, Patrick Roy with 16. Van Beesbroek with 12. And even after that 8 spot, Van Beesbroek still is your save percentage leader in the playoffs with a .931. So he had an excellent playoff, and he cements himself as one of the better goalies of that era. Now, does he end up getting in the Hall of Fame someday? We'll see. There's a lot of names that come up in these videos that you say, it's kind of surprising that guy's not in the Hall, and you can make arguments for or against, and go ahead and do either. But these guys win the Stanley Cup. Colorado, their first year in Denver, and they bring the Stanley Cup with them. And it helps a little bit that they get that guy Patrick Roy, because right from Game 1 in Denver, he is out to prove Montreal fans and media wrong. That he's not over the hill, he's not past it, and he's still capable of winning. Because when he left Montreal, that was part of the conversation in Montreal was, well, Patrick Roy is not really the best anymore, so it's fine. They move on. We like Thibault. Thibault's going to be fine. And Thibault would be okay, but he's no Patrick Roy. Anyways, let me know your thoughts, as always, in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. This has been the 95-96 season. Colorado's your winner. I'll talk to you again soon.